If you're from Italy, Spain, or France, you know the frustration. You study English for years, but it never feels as natural as it does for someone from, say, Sweden, Norway, or even Portugal. Why? The popular answer is TV, media, movies, and subtitles. And that surely is the case, but that's barely scratching the surface. A viral video by my friend and colleague Til Musov gave an answer that resonated with hundreds of thousands of people. And in this video, I react to Til's key points and some incredible viewer comments to uncover the deeper truth. Yes, it's about our mindset, our history, and even our national pride and a social cost of being fluent that no one ever talks about. For those who are new to this channel, I'm Luca Rampariello, a language coach, lover, and entrepreneur who's been learning and perfecting 14 foreign languages over the last 34 years. My goal is to help you become a more effective and confident learner, and that is why I've distilled my exact system for mastering a language with movies into a completely free guide for you called How to Learn a Language with Movies and TV Shows. The link is waiting for you in the pinned comment and in the description box below this video. Alrighty. Let's get into it.
Norway, Sweden. South of it, Spain, Italy, and France. The divide is stark and consistent. And this isn't a one-year fluke. This north-south English divide has been the same story for years. But why? Is it genetics, intelligence, natural talent? None of these.
Til is right on the mark here. I've been traveling all around Europe, and I can definitely tell you that the southern part of Europe doesn't speak English as well as the northern part. There are some outliers or some exceptions, but in general, it's actually true. Especially my own country, Italy, in France and Spain, people don't speak English that well. It's changing. The new generation speaks English definitely better than the older generation, but in general, this is quite true.
My first thought was language similarity. German, Dutch, Norwegian, and Swedish are all Germanic languages like English. That does give them a clear advantage and is definitely part of the puzzle.
That's absolutely true. Language distance is an important concept in the sense that if a language is closer to yours, then it's easier or it takes less time to learn it. That is surely the case for example, Dutch and English, or Norwegian and English, or Swedish and English, because these are all Germanic languages. But as you will see in this video, that's not the only factor here. It's just one of the many factors. Of course, it makes things a little bit easier, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not the most important thing.
But then there's Finland. Finland ranks 14th out of 86, which is still excellent. Not only is Finnish not a Germanic language, it's not even Indo-European. It's completely unrelated to English. Today we're going to uncover...
Now, Finland is a really interesting example. It's not just about English, it's about the education system in general. Now, case in point, Finland was lagging behind in the first part of the 20th century, and they did not understand why. Then they had the courage of actually stopping, like the government, to stop and reflect upon what was not working. Something that a lot of other governments, a lot of other countries, unfortunately, haven't done, reflecting about the education system. And what happened is that it resulted into a revolution. Now, there's a PISA assessment. It's a famous assessment. It's an international assessment. It stands for Program for International Students Assessment, or something along those lines, that basically gauges, measures, assesses the knowledge and the skills of 15-year-olds, old students, in things like science, maths, language, and whatnot. And it turns out that Finland always ranks among the top 10 or the top 5. And this has been happening over the last 20 years, if I'm not wrong. And this goes to show that it's the system that works. It reminds me of a documentary that you can watch on YouTube. I'll put the link in the description box, where Michael Moore, famous American director, goes to charges to Finland because he was very curious to know why the system works so well. And he is stunned and taken aback by the replies of both teachers and students, who basically say, well, we don't spend much time in class. We don't have homework. We don't have marks. We don't have grades. The whole system is all about, enjoying nature, being outside, and of course, learning. And it's very counterintuitive, right? Because we tend to think that in some other parts of the world, you have to sit there for 5 hours. It reminds me of those very long hours at school where I had to sit and I was just bored to death, right? And you can actually learn being outside, and you can learn in the nature and in real life. The Romans used to say, non in schole sed in vite discimos. We learn in real life and not in school, and I wholeheartedly concur. So this rant to say that it's not just about the English language, the language education is also education in general, that we have to review it and we have to think better about how the whole thing works.
About the other, more hidden reasons behind Europe's divide. and some of them will surely surprise you. Outliers like Croatia and Greece tell us that the real story isn't about where you are on the map. It's about the systems, incentives, and cultural factors that either accelerate or hinder English learning.
I love it. It's not just about where you are, it's not where you live, it's how you operate, the system within which you operate. And when it comes to not just systems and governments and countries, but when it comes to the single individual, really makes a difference. It's not where you live, but how you live. For example, if you are, say, if Mark, an American student, goes to Spain, charges to Spain, and spends most of his time with other Americans, doesn't learn the language, he might live there for the rest of his life without ending up speaking the language. And this is the case for a lot of people living abroad who don't speak the language. Think about a lot of foreigners who live in Budapest or in Prague or in Poland, for that matter, in Krakow, here in Krakow. Well, on the other hand, if you spend time learning the language at your place, and the internet allows that nowadays, you can immerse yourself with the language wherever you are, and then and that you live in your own country, then you meet people who speak their target language, then it's a whole different thing. Of course, if you combine the where, if you live in country, and on top of that you're willing to learn the language, that multiplies, enhances your capacity of acquiring the language fast.
Interestingly enough, South America shows the North-South divide in the opposite direction. Let's start with something that explains both the success of the Nordics as well as the outliers in the south of Europe. Size matters. We all know that. When
I like that smirk.
Your entire country has fewer people than London, you need English to talk to the world. Nordic countries are small but wealthy. Their businesses are international by necessity. Their media markets are tiny. Their academic communities need global collaboration. And look at our outliers, Croatia, Greece, Portugal. What do they have in common? They are all relatively small countries with strong tourism industries and significant immigration. Small countries can't afford to be linguistically isolated. English isn't a nice to have, it's economic necessity. When speaking English determines whether you can get a job, travel for work, or access international opportunities, motivation takes care of itself. The second...
That's absolutely true. Necessità fa virtù, we say in Italian. Necessity makes the virtue, literally.
Reason are the Nordic universities, which have created a massive advantage. In Nordic countries, higher education is free, or at least very cheap, or rather paid by taxes. So more people go to university. But not only that, the education increasingly happens in English. Nordic universities have dramatically expanded English medium instruction over the past decade, especially in master's programs. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Although I have to say that even southern countries are catching up in this regard, but it's true that not everything, but a lot of classes are in English in northern countries, and that, of course, makes a big difference. Reading academic papers, writing thesis chapters, participating in seminars, all in English. This creates a population comfortable with complex and sophisticated use of English. Compare this to countries like France or Italy, where university education is still predominantly in the local language. French students might take an English class, but they are not living and breathing in English for years during their most intensive learning period. Also, Nordic countries...
That's absolutely... This is a very important point. They're not living and breathing. If you take a class, that's one thing. It happens once a week or maybe a couple of classes. But when the entire program is in English, then that's a different matter. If you start living in the language, really in the short as well as in the long term, that is what really makes a difference.
Not being able to speak English is genuinely embarrassing for most. It's a basic expectation, like knowing how to drive or use a computer. English proficiency signals education, sophistication, and international awareness.
This is a very important point. When all the other peers, all the other people around speak English well, if you don't speak well, then you feel like dumb. And the opposite is true in countries like Italy, France, and Spain, where a lot of people don't speak English. So you say, okay, well, I don't speak English. All the others don't speak English, so that's not a problem. So peer pressure is important. It can work in a negative sense, but also in a positive sense, in a positive direction, pushing you to you catch up with the competence and knowledge and skills of the other people around you.
In Germany, there's also this meme that we always apologize for our bad English while being able to speak very fluently. But of course, this is not the case for everyone here.
And that's true. I was in Berlin, and that was in 2004, if I remember correctly. I remember I was at a mall in Alexanderplatz, or next to Alexanderplatz, and I already spoke German rather fluently at that time, but I liked not teasing people, but sometimes interacting in English to see if they could actually speak English, because I had heard that that was not true, especially in Eastern Germany. And case in point, I stumbled upon a dude. I was asking, where can I find it? I don't remember exactly what I asked him. It doesn't matter. But he replied, ich kann kein Englisch, with a very stern face. I went like, okay. Then I started speaking German, and warum sprichst du Englisch, wenn du Deutsch sprichst? No? So he was asking me, why do you speak English? Warum sprichst du mich auf Deutsch an? Why are you addressing, like talking to me in English if you speak German? But that was, really interesting. And it's a stereotype. It's a common Vorurteil or stereotype that all Germans speak English very well. Especially in Eastern Germany, that is not the case.
It's this fear of making mistakes, which I assume is common in some of these Nordic countries too. That's the level of expectation we are talking about here. So if everyone around you speaks English well, you are motivated to keep up. But here's the factor that maybe matters more of them all. TV. Or rather, how you watch TV.
Oh, this sounds juicy. How you watch TV counts.
There's actually research on this. A study called TV or Not TV, the impact of subtitling on English skills, found a large positive effect for subtitled original version broadcasts as opposed to dubbed television on English proficiency scores. The citizens of countries where television is broadcast in the original version would have better English vocabulary, grammar, and in particular listening comprehension than those of countries where programs are dubbed. Surprisingly, only 12% of Europeans think that television is useful for learning foreign languages.
Here's the surprising thing about this. This thing is not surprising at all. The fact that people who watch television in English speak English better. The surprising thing is why people think that television does not play a role, or only 12% think that, watching TV plays an important role in the acquisition of the English language.
It's not just useful, it's the most useful thing you can do next to listening and reading to other content.
And that's absolutely true. Listening and reading to other content like podcasts and short stories and videos on YouTube, and then watching TV series and TV shows. TV series, TV shows, movies and whatnot.
English skills are better in countries where television films and programs are subtitled. The magnitude of our effect is large, equivalent to 16.9%. 1.5 standard deviations of the average level of English skills.
Now, this is a really important point, and it's so important. The central idea, this is at the core of the entire video, that a lot of people were reacting to it in the comments, and I wanted to read a couple of them. I downloaded them. Not all of them, because there were hundreds of, maybe thousands, but I just selected quite a few that were quite revealing. And we're going to start with, I have them here. I printed them here. So I'm going to read them directly from this piece of paper. Johan Tolle, sweet here. I learned English before the internet was widespread, and American TV with subtitles was pretty much the main reason why. You reached a proficiency in English at such an early age when every other program on TV was in English with Swedish subtitles. Back in the 90s when I was young, most people were fluent by their mid-teens, but now it seems like kids are getting to a fluent level even younger. My nephew seems to understand quite a bit of English, and he's barely 5-year-old. Well, what can I say? It's been like this for over 40 years, I guess, 40, 50 years. And that really, really makes a difference. Watching television, think about it. If you start watching television since you're a little child, your TV is on, your parents are watching something, or you're watching something, and everything is dubbed, and you can actually see the subtitles when you can read 6 or 7, then the language gets in you, because we primarily acquire language by listening. So you first listen without even looking at the subtitles, but then you go to school, and you learn the formally you learn English, and on top of that you learn to read, and you start reading the subtitles in your native language. Let's say a Swede, in this case, who watches television in English with Swedish subtitles, and then bingo, you acquire the language pretty well. On the other side of the spectrum, let's say there are Italians and Spaniards and, the French who don't dub anything, not movies in the movie theaters, not on television. And here's what a French says here, Noxus 3754. As a French, yes, most people here just use dubbed medias, etc. Most importantly, they could live their entire life without knowing anything related to English and to the English-speaking countries. We have our own TV shows, our own literature, our own medias, our own translated technology. I noticed that many languages use words like software, while we in French just say logiciel. We have our own words. To make it short, we don't need English at all. It's only a bonus as much as any other language. I wouldn't call it bonus. I think that in the 21st century, you should learn English, because if you want to operate and work and live, in a global world, and you want to make friends, foreign friends, chances are that you have to learn English. But the truth is that, as Noxy said, you can live and operate and survive and thrive within an only speak French speaking place. And then we have a countryman here, Norma, Italian here. I learn English watching TV. Italian here. I learn English watching TV. Normally movies here are dubbed, but you can change the language. But many people here don't speak very good English. Younger generations are starting, but older people or even people my age don't speak English, and the reason is a cultural one. When you live in a country where everything is translated into your native language, you don't feel the push to learn another language. These are great comments, and they address the fact that in the northern countries, English is a fact of life, while in other countries, it's almost like a bonus, like in Italy and France and Spain, they have all these things in common. Now, let me give you my own, perspective, my own experience learning languages. I'm a bit of an outlier because being Italian, a native Italian, I was born in a monolingual household. I grew up my parents spoke Italian. And I started watching TV, especially in English and in French, when I was 13 and 14. And that is the moment where my skills, both in English and French, skyrocketed, took off, because I started consuming content just in these two languages, especially movies. Not only also TV shows when it comes to French, but come to think of it, for 2 or 3 years, I was just watching almost one movie every single day, especially in French, but actually in both languages. And I did it with French subtitles when I was watching French television and French movies, and English subtitles when it came to watching movies in English. In particular, I remember I went to the kiosk every month. There was the movie of the month, Speak Up. That was the series where not only did it have English subtitles, like hard subtitles on screen, but you can also read the transcript. It came with a transcript of the entire movie, and I was ruthlessly and avidly looking up every single word. You had a glossary there, explained some of the expressions, cultural notes, etc. And I just bring it on. And so I was just watching a lot of this stuff, and that really made a difference. So even if I'm Italian and I was living in an environment where being able to speak English well was not expected, out of my personal interest and out of my personal passion, I was doing all that. So that's why I think, once again, that the system does count, but at the end of the day is what the individual does. It comes down to individual choices and passion and systems and habits and whatnot.
Every time you turn on your TV, or for some it's YouTube, you get listening comprehension. You get input in the language you want to acquire. You are learning through this input and do that without even trying. This is at the core of how I approach language learning and my channel in general, where we always talk about how to find the right kind of input for your level and interest, and why learning through reading, watching and listening is so much better than textbooks. I believe in this and have experienced this myself with my English and Spanish skills to a degree that I decided to build my own language learning app, Langia. Langia focuses on creating content at your level that matches your interests, because when content is compelling, learning happens naturally. Subtitle TV.
I like it. When content is compelling, that's when learning happens naturally. And I've been trying Langia. I've been using Langia for Turkish. It's really a game changer. I just love it.
Shows also give us a potential reason why Portugal outperforms Spain. Well, one of them typically uses subtitles, the other typically dubs their content. Spain and Portugal share many geographical and cultural traits, but the number of Spanish speakers is double that of Portuguese speakers. Again, maybe in part because of this, Portugal uses subtitling while in Spain television is dubbed. And as a result, Portugal's results are much better than Spain's.
An excellent point here. Think about it. Portugal and Spain, they are on the same peninsula, very close, and yet in general, people speak much better English in Portugal than in Spain. Why is that? Well, Till just said it, and I want to read another comment, very interesting. Jorge Balata, he's from Portugal, 2046. As someone from Portugal who learned English really young, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that the biggest factor was media. In Portugal, almost no foreign language media is dubbed, including Spanish shows. This even included cartoons in the early 2000s. My dad still remembers hearing me speak English to myself at 5-6 years old because I used to watch hours of Cartoon Network, and that was my entire exposure at the time. That is what I used to do as well when I was watching movies, especially American movies, but also French. What I used to do is that after watching the movie, I spent at least 30 minutes reciting some lines. I was just taking notes, and then I was reciting these lines, imitating the actors. So it's not just a matter of getting exposed to the content, getting exposed to all these movies, but also then you naturally start imitating the actors or what you hear, and that really makes a difference once again, because when you're a child, you absorb the language much better, especially through listening and then obviously through speaking.
Another factor is money. People say money talks. Well, it speaks English. Northern Europeans travel more, creating real-world motivation and practice opportunities. When you can afford to backpack through the world or study abroad, English becomes immediately useful and not just theoretically. Wealth, of course, also means access to quality English education, international schools, and private tutoring. It's not just that Northern Europeans start learning English early, it's that they encounter it everywhere. A Norwegian teenager doesn't just study English in school, they live partially in English online. I mean, we all kinda do, but for some countries this relation is stronger than for others. Video games, music, social media, YouTube, Twitch streams, all predominantly in English because there's just not that much translation happening. So they learn slang and casual expressions and real-world communication inductively without ever really focusing on it.
Yeah, this is an excellent point. And by the way, this reminds me of my own experience that on top of watching a lot of movies, I also played a lot of video games. I still remember, for example, Monkey Island 1, 2. Well, it didn't have audio at the beginning, but then you could read the subtitles. I was doing that in English, and then, I kept playing a lot of games, and most of these games were in English, and then I started doing that for example, in German. You could select the language when things got a little bit more refined, because back in the 90s, you could, let's say that the video games were not particularly sophisticated, but then the main point is on top of movies, then you have video games, and now you have YouTube, you have Twitch, you do everything in English.
This immersion starts young and never stops. By the time they are adults, they have had thousands of hours of formal and informal English practice that their Southern European counterparts simply haven't experienced to the same degree. The results, English doesn't feel foreign anymore.
Exactly. It becomes familiar, right? It's not something that you see as a subject at school, like Italian kids, for example. Oh, I have to do English. That's a subject, an external subject. It's not part of my life versus, oh, this is part of my life.
It's part of your social and digital life. And finally, let's talk about something that may sound a little ridiculous, but I do believe it makes sense, and that's the weather. When it's dark and cold for half the year, you spend more time indoors, which potentially means consuming more media, more Netflix, more YouTube, more online content, all of which tends to be in English. At the same time, Southern Europeans are outside, enjoying their beautiful weather and socializing in their native language. Is this the most important factor? Maybe, probably not. But when
I agree that probably the weather is not the most important factor. It might make a difference, but I think other factors count, especially television.
You combine it with everything else, the subtitles, the social expectations, the economic necessity, even the weather contributes to creating an environment where English learning happens naturally.
Yeah, he's got a point, right? It's a lot of things. There are some factors that are bigger than others. So what the weather might play a role, but I think that predominantly it's about consuming media and, the general mindset. And speaking of mindset and culture and social expectations, I wanted to address a couple of other comments which I found very interesting, and I'm going to address them right now. In particular, there are two comments that struck me. They both come from France. The first one is from JP16K92, and he says, as a French English teacher, I agree with your conclusions, but I think you're missing a crucial point: history and pride. France, I imagine Spain too used to be powerful nations, rivals with England, and I believe in the mindset of people there's still this resentment that we're not anymore great nations. You cannot imagine how much difficulty I have to make my students watch a movie in English. They just do not want to play the game. This is a very important point, and I've heard this countless times because I lived in France, and also I got the same impression in Spain. And in Italy, to some extent, although not as much as in Spain and in France, that history does play a role. You have to think about the mindset that gets passed down, this kind of mindset, this kind of approach that gets passed down from generation to generation. And I think it plays an important role in deciding, okay, we have our own language, especially the French are very proud of their nation, of their history. And French was the most important language in the 18th century. In Russia, in the courts, they spoke French, but it was the diplomatic language in general. It lost a lot of, let's say, privileges. It lost its privileges like a lingua franca of the world. And I think that also plays a role. It might look invisible to most people, but it does play a role in the decision or the decisions that people make when it comes to learning, in particular, English. And the second comment that I want to address is Bale Caldwin, I hope I pronounced it well, 1993. Past a certain point, it becomes worse than that. I'm French and speak fluent English. My point is, we all crave acceptance, community, a sense of belonging in the group. In France, at least, speaking English, consuming English content can be isolating. That's right, isolating in the sense that you will be exposed to content that your peers can't relate to. You can become a bit alienated, estranged to a point. And in France, and I assume Spain and Italy as well, you're not shamed for speaking English poorly, but you can become othered a bit if you speak it too well. This reminds me exactly of my experience in Italy. When I started speaking English well, because I was taking classes with Susan and I was watching Susan, my American tutor, and I was watching a lot of American movies, I started speaking like this with a kind of a nasal sounding American English accent. And actually, the reaction by my peers was negative. It was not positive. It was not like, oh, Luca speaks English so well. Some people did, but it did react positively. But the bottom line is most people did not react positively because it was not like, oh, this guy doesn't belong to the tribe anymore. And I resisted that. A lot of people, I believe that there's a lot of people who are talented, but they get the so-called peer pressure and social pressure of actually having to conform. I did not want to conform. I just wanted to form stuff in my head, form another identity. And that's what happened. So this goes to show that there's a lot of factors that you have to consider when it comes to learning English, especially in countries like Italy, Spain, etc. So in my case, I was, again, an outlier because I wanted to do things by myself. I did not want to conform. And basically, I resisted this social pressure because I was just too passionate about English, too passionate about the American world. I wanted to blend in. I wanted to sound like an American. I wanted to be an American. But for most people, this simply doesn't work because maybe they're not interested. They have social pressure. They see that other people don't speak English well, and all the other very interesting things that Till addressed in this video.
The good news, many of these advantages can be recreated by you at home without living in some of these Nordic countries. Maybe not changing the weather or suddenly being wealthy, but you can switch to subtitles instead of dubbing. You can create social expectations by joining English-speaking communities online. You can consume English media for topics you actually care about. You can treat English as necessary for your goals, not optional. You can build your own immersive environment through gaming, social media, and streaming. And so this mindset shift is crucial. You don't...
Absolutely correct. What counts is what you do at the individual level. Of course, if let's say the environment is conducive to you learning English or other languages is great, but at the end of the day, it comes down to personal decisions.
You don't need to move to Norway to create this environment. You just need to understand what makes it work and build your own version of it. So
that's exactly right. Nowadays, differently from 40 years ago when I started learning languages, actually 30 years ago, I'm not that old, things were different, but now you can recreate the environment entirely in your target language. Of course, you also have to use it in a natural context, but you can make friends. You can possibly then go to the country and use the language, speak the language, but you can do a lot of things by yourself at home now.
Yes, geography might influence English proficiency, but you can change your linguistic geography without moving countries. Now, I hope this video made you feel motivated to continue whatever language you are currently learning.
It did. Till's video went viral because it started a massive, important conversation. The core idea that high volume exposure is key regardless of where you live is 100% correct. But as we saw from the comments, the tool isn't the point. In the 90s, the tool was Subtitle TV, but today it's YouTube and video games. The underlying principle, the one lesson I want you to walk away with, is that fluency comes from building a world where your target language is unavoidable as well as it is compelling. It's not about finding the one perfect method that so many people aspire to. It's about engineering your environment so that learning happens naturally. It's about adopting the mind of a scientist and finding what truly engages you. One of the coolest ingredients of this environment is, without a doubt, movies and TV series. So if those are of your taste, and if you want to start building that environment today, I've put everything into my free workbook, How to Learn a Language with Movies and TV Shows. And if you haven't reached the necessary level to enjoy those, I highly, highly recommend Linguia. I have an affiliate program with Till's great tool, and I've been using it for Turkish to bridge the gap between A2 and B1, and let me tell you, it's working wonders. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deeper dive, you'll probably love another reaction video I did to one of Till's amazing videos. It's somewhere up here. As always, happy language learning, and I'll see you in the next video.